The Sword of Damocles. A razor-sharp blade dangling over the head of anyone sitting upon the throne by a single thread. A bomb under the table, waiting to go off. The ever-present specter of mortality. All of these storytelling tools are meant to do one thing: heighten tension. Whether it be the tension felt by the characters in the story, the audience watching the events of the story play out, or both, the looming threat is always there, raising stakes and anxiety, waiting for just the right moment to strike. The Amazing Digital Circus is a show produced by Glitch Studios and directed by Gooseworks. It's bright, colorful, and zany, with characters you love to see bounce off each other, and some absolutely hilarious moments.
I'm right behind you, aren't I?
It's also a horrifying existential nightmare about a bunch of deeply unwell people trapped inside of a virtual reality landscape ruled over by an unstable, hyperactive AI with godlike powers. Oh, and sometimes stuff like this happens. An absolute delight to watch, and I say that without a hint of irony. Directly inspired by the classic science fiction horror novella, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison, it's no surprise that the Amazing Digital Circus has its fair share of looming threats. But the one I want to talk about today is the one that has had fans guessing since episode 1. Abstraction! See, in the world of the Amazing Digital Circus, the humans that enter it are put under a great deal of stress thanks to, well, not being able to leave or remember their names. This stress can cause them to become unstable, and if their psychological state deteriorates too much, they can become abstracted. We see this very plainly in episode 1, when Pomni, Jax, and Ragatha go looking for Kaufmo, a resident of the circus who claims to have seen an exit to the place. They find him in his room, completely transformed into a monster that chases them throughout the circus until Kane catches him and tosses him into the cellar, where he apparently puts all the other abstractions. This very cleanly sets up the threat of abstraction. Not only could anyone in the circus turn into a monster if their mind deteriorates enough, but they'd also be sent into the lonely abyss of the cellar by Kane. It's a horrifying state of being to consider, but it's also a fascinating one. People can't die in the circus, but that doesn't stop them from feeling at least some pain, and it certainly doesn't stop them from feeling emotional or psychological distress. And with the threat of abstraction hanging over their heads, each character becomes a ticking time bomb, leaving fans constantly theorizing about who is going to abstract next. Will it be Pomni, who seems practically on the brink of breaking right from episode 1? Will it be Kinger, whom everyone considers insane already? Will it be Ragatha, who breaks from the constant pressure of trying to keep the peace? Or Gangle with her fragile emotions and many anxieties? Or Zubul with their body dysmorphia? Or, as recent episodes have been hinting, will it be Jax and his refusal to accept the circus as real? It's much the same speculation that goes on with dark fantasies like Game of Thrones. Whose head is next up on the chopping block? Everyone has had their theories, and with the final episode set to get a theatrical release on June 4th of this year, the debates online have been running rampant. But as you can see from the video title, I think that... Okay, seriously, what is going... What? Really? A transdimensional distortion? Now? Well, at least it gave me a thematically appropriate form this time. Sorry, friends and fictional folk, for the jarring shift in appearance. Seems the universe has a sense of humor. Anyway, while I try and figure out a way out of here, I might as well explain my theory since I still have my recording equipment. So, on what grounds do I base my theory that no one is going to abstract? After all, spoiler warning, but in the latest episode, Kane had a bit of a mental breakdown himself, and proceeded to torture the humans for days on end. And now, after trying to stop him, Kinger has accidentally killed Kane, completely deleting the AI from the circus he created. Now all the humans are stuck in a crumbling digital world, and still have no way of escaping back to the living world. Who wouldn't break under those circumstances? But here's the thing. It's those same circumstances that make it extremely unlikely that anyone is going to abstract during the final episode. Despite, or rather thanks to, the torture Kane put everyone through in episode 8, the surviving humans of the circus have grown closer than ever before. Their bonds with each other are rock solid, and we've seen that it is those sorts of bonds which have helped them all stave off abstraction in the past. But what about Jax? I hear you ask. During episode 8, we saw him on the cusp of abstracting again, and in the promotional art Glitch has been posting for episode 9, we see him standing alone, away from the main group. That's true, imaginary commenter I've constructed to set me up for a counter-argument, but there's a crucial factor you're forgetting in all this. Episode 9 is the last episode of the show. One way or another, the story has to conclude. Considering that episode 8 felt, in many ways, like a climax with the defeat of Cain, my prediction is that episode 9 will be something of a denouement, also known more colloquially as a wrap-up or a resolution. We hit the darkest moment. We overcame the final boss.
Wait.
Now it's time to figure out how to live in a world without its god. And given my experience with making and consuming media, I see only 4 ways the amazing digital circus could end. Ending 1. They escape the circus. In this first possible ending, the humans of the circus somehow manage to find or make an exit out of the digital world and return to their physical bodies. This seems extremely unlikely given we have numerous pieces of evidence pointing to the likelihood of every human we see being a brain scan or digital clone. In episode 1, when we zoom out of the circus, no one is sitting at the computer or wearing the headset Pomni said she put on to enter the digital world. In episode 8, Cain directly mentions each human having a mind file, and given the fact that the amazing digital circus, the computer program, has been running for over a decade, if anyone really was getting stuck to a headset, then surely someone would have come looking for them by now. But we see no evidence of anyone trying to tamper with the circus from the outside. All that lends credence to the digital clone theory, which, if true, would mean the humans physically can't leave the circus because they aren't human. They are post-human digital intelligences and have no physical bodies to return to. Meaning, for better or worse, they are stuck in the circus, which nixes this ending, but also leads to the possibility of ending 2. They all abstract. In this ending, everybody abstracts. Whether due to mental breakdowns caused by the revelation of their existence as digital clones, or because it's the only way to become one with the void or something like that, in this ending, all the humans finally give in to abstraction. While perhaps somewhat fitting given the inspiration for the show, I find this ending just as unlikely as the previous ending. For one, it would be a major letdown unless they reveal something about abstraction we didn't know yet. 2. Gooseworks has stated that the theme of the show is that there is value in a stagnant life. To me, abstraction represents giving up on life as a whole, and that is very different from accepting to live a stagnant life, because, well, a stagnant life is still a life, and you have to choose to live it. What's more, as much as fandoms or editors can tempt a creator into writing a rocks fall, everyone dies sort of ending, speaking from my own experience, actually writing that sort of ending is really hard to do purely out of spite. But okay, maybe everyone abstracting is too far. What if we have something like ending 3? Only Jax abstracts. We've been shown, on multiple occasions, that despite Jax seemingly brushing everything off as a joke or not real, that he is perhaps the closest to fully breaking down and abstracting. That, along with the promotional material for the episode, suggests that if anyone were to abstract, it would be him. A way to bookend the series with the other characters sticking together while Jax goes off and becomes the clown who abstracts. Problem is, there's no Cain to drop abstractions into the cellar anymore. In fact, we don't know if the abstractions are still down there, or if they'll start to break out now that Cain is gone and the circus is crumbling. And while I find it unlikely that Jax will abstract now that he has people who have proven they'll stick by him even when he's putting up walls and being a jerk, the humans are going to have to deal with the abstractions one way or another. And to do that, I think they'll end up reaching ending 4. The humans become the new masters of the amazing digital circus. With confirmation from Kinger that anyone with enough training can learn to conjure things into existence in the circus much like Cain could, I think it extremely likely that we will see the remaining humans learn to master this power in order to save themselves from the crumbling circus. With this power, they could deal with the abstractions who are sure to flood out of the cellar. And more importantly, they can make a real home for themselves. A home where, perhaps, they could rehabilitate the abstracted humans. This, to me, feels most in keeping with the themes of the show, and would solve the tension caused by the threat of abstracting, which was always something the show would have to deal with eventually. Now, I'm always ready to be surprised. After all, you never know exactly how a story is going to play out until it does. But I think that these are the most likely possibilities. And of these possibilities, the one that feels more likely than all the others is the one where the humans become masters of the circus. But is that a cop-out ending? After all, if that ending comes to pass, I can see many people complaining that Gooseworks set up abstraction as a Chekhov's gun that never fired. And in a longer story, you might be right. But The Amazing Digital Circus is not a long story. It is a tight, concise, 9-episode show, and in what is essentially a mini-series like that, abstraction works perfectly. Way back at the start of this video, I compared The Amazing Digital Circus to Game of Thrones, and that was no accident. In many ways, both stories rely on the tension and suspense of not knowing who is going to die, or abstract, next. The threat that anyone could die or abstract is established early in both shows, and leveraged for maximum drama. But where Game of Thrones has to keep feeding its characters to the meat grinder thanks to its sheer length, The Amazing Digital Circus gets to have its cake and eat it too. Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, is a winding, bloody fantasy epic spanning many years and entire continents. Its world is vast, and its intrigues complex, but it's also propped itself, in no small part, on the promise of blood and gore and grit. Anyone could die, and that is proven time and again, but if George R.R. Martin didn't regularly kill important characters, I guarantee the series audience would eventually get bored and drop the story. And that sort of pressure to kill your babies as a writer can be really hard. Tension cannot last forever. Eventually, it's going to slacken, if not regularly reinforced or paid off. But The Amazing Digital Circus doesn't have that problem. As a short and focused 9-episode story, The Amazing Digital Circus can have its characters constantly teetering on the edge of abstraction without ever sending them fully over. We, the audience, are never given enough time for the tension to fully slacken. To the point that I bet many people haven't even noticed that no one has abstracted since episode 1. Heck, we didn't even see or get to know Kaufmo before he abstracted. Yet the threat of abstraction has been hanging over the heads of every character ever since we first saw what the process could do. Abstraction is not a Chekhov's gun. At least, it's not the popular understanding of what a Chekhov's gun is. It's a ticking time bomb. To show you what I mean, let me briefly explain both of those terms. Chekhov's gun, codified by Russian playwright Anton Chekhov, is essentially the concept of setup and payoff. If you bring attention to a gun on stage during a scene, it better go off by the end of the play. This, of course, applies to more than simply physical props. Character traits, story threads, world-building elements, all of these serve as parts of the story that should, in some way, contribute to the story. A character trait should play a part in that character's development. A story thread should get resolved by the end. A piece of world building should be impactful to how things play off. But here's the thing many people miss about Chekhov's gun. It doesn't have to go off. A gun can be introduced prominently into a scene, but that doesn't mean the gun needs to go off. Simply that something should be done with it. Maybe the gun does go off, but maybe instead the person wielding the gun is talked down from firing it, and the gun is dropped. This is where Chekhov's gun gets crossed with another trope that people might understand a little better when it comes to abstraction: the ticking time bomb. The ticking time bomb, as a trope, was first explained, though not named, by English filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock. Hitchcock once described two scenes. One where two characters have a conversation, and at the end of the scene, a bomb goes off, killing both characters. That is shock. But if you show the audience that there's a bomb under the table at the start of the scene, that is suspense. Now you might have noticed that in the second scenario, the bomb becomes a Chekhov's gun. It is an element of a story that has been plainly established as important. Thus, common understanding of Chekhov's gun states that the bomb must explode by the end. But what if it doesn't? What if the characters know about the bomb, or discover its existence, and right at the last minute, manage to disarm the device? Then the audience is relieved. Whether the bomb explodes or not, the tension of the scene is released in a narratively satisfying way. Because of this, and the short, concise nature of the show, I truly believe that The Amazing Digital Circus can and will end with no one abstracting, and maybe even with the process being reversed. Or I could be wrong and they all deliberately abstract themselves to become one with the void, or something like that. But I kind of doubt that's gonna happen. Regardless of whether I'm right or wrong, I can't wait to see how episode 9 unfolds. And to celebrate the incredible ride that the amazing digital circus has been, let's end this video like everyone's favorite character, Disappearing Guy.